How did one city become the graveyard of over 2 million souls? Why did Hitler's most ambitious campaign turn into a nightmare that shattered the Nazi war machine? Stalingrad wasn't just a battle, it was a brutal turning point that rewrote the fate of World War II forever. The Battle of Stalingrad was one of the deadliest confrontations in human history. Fought between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, it marked a turning point in World War II. The battle's ferocity, scale, and brutality shocked the world and redefined the Eastern Front forever. Germany's invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941 was swift and brutal. Operation Barbarossa saw Nazi forces advancing rapidly, capturing cities and overwhelming defenses. Hitler believed the Soviet Union would collapse under pressure. But the Russians resisted, and the war turned into a bitter attrition. By 1942, Hitler turned his focus south. Oil in the Caucasus became a strategic obsession. Stalingrad, though not initially the main target, became symbolically and logistically vital. Securing it would cut Soviet supply lines and guard the German flank. The stage for slaughter was set. The German Sixth Army, led by General Paulus, advanced toward Stalingrad in the summer of 1942. Soviet resistance stiffened as Stalin ordered no retreat. The Volga River behind the city became a barrier and a lifeline. Supplies flowed in, but so did German bombs. Luftwaffe raids devastated Stalingrad in August. Fires engulfed homes, factories, and civilians. The city was reduced to smoldering ruins. Ironically, the destruction favored defenders. Rubble turned into strongholds, and snipers made each ruin deadly. German blitzkrieg lost its edge in shattered terrain. Despite overwhelming numbers, the German advance slowed. Street-by-street fighting began. Soviet soldiers called it the Rattenkrieg, Rat War. Cellars, sewers, and buildings became battlegrounds. Neither side gave ground easily. Each block changed hands multiple times. Casualties mounted with every bullet and grenade. As Germans pushed closer to the Volga, Soviet reinforcements continued arriving at night. They crossed under fire, braving snipers and artillery. Women, civilians, and teenagers were among them. The Red Army fought with desperation, knowing surrender meant death or enslavement. By October, German control covered most of the city. Yet resistance never ceased. Soviet troops held key factories and riverbanks. A single building might see hundreds die in a day. The Germans were exhausted, but Hitler refused retreat. The trap was quietly closing. Stalingrad became a frozen hell. Winter descended with brutal force. Temperatures dropped below -30 degrees Celsius. Frostbite, starvation, and disease plagued both sides. Corpses littered the streets. Dogs and rats fed on the dead. Yet the battle continued, day and night, unrelenting and merciless. The Germans lacked proper winter clothing. Supplies dwindled. Trucks froze. Wounded soldiers died where they lay. Hospitals were overrun. Meanwhile, Soviet troops adapted. Sleds, skis, and camouflage became vital. Civilians dug trenches, built bunkers, and fought alongside soldiers. Every soul became part of the war machine. The Soviet 62nd Army under General Zhukov played a vital role. Zhukov embraced close-quarter combat to neutralize German air superiority. He positioned troops dangerously close to German lines. This, hugging tactics, denied enemy bombers the ability to strike without risking friendly fire. Buildings like Pavlov's house became icons of defiance. A handful of Soviet soldiers held it for nearly 2 months. Reinforced with mines, machine guns, and mortars, it repelled wave after wave. Its defense cost hundreds of German lives and became a propaganda symbol. Food was so scarce that soldiers ate rats, leather, and glue. Water was fetched from the frozen Volga under sniper fire. Ammunition was limited. Often, soldiers entered combat with just one rifle per squad, passing it along as comrades fell. Despite suffering, morale remained high among Soviets. Propaganda, discipline, and survival instinct fueled their resistance. Soldiers scrawled messages on walls, "Not one step back." They sang songs amid ruins. Even wounded men returned to fight. They were defending not just a city, but their homeland. Meanwhile, German troops grew desperate. They sent pleas for reinforcements and supplies. But Hitler ordered them to hold. The Sixth Army was stretched thin, encircled by bitter enemies, crushed by cold and starvation. Their once proud offensive turned into a slow, agonizing death sentence. On November 19, 1942, the Soviet Union unleashed Operation Uranus. It was a massive counteroffensive, targeting the weaker Romanian and Hungarian troops guarding German flanks. Soviet tanks smashed through in freezing fog. Within days, the Axis lines crumbled. The trap snapped shut. The Germans were stunned. They believed the Red Army lacked the strength to counterattack. But Stalin had been quietly stockpiling reserves. Entire tank armies, artillery, and infantry divisions emerged from behind the lines. The offensive moved like thunder, swallowing whole divisions in hours. Soviet pincers from the north and south met at Kalach on November 23. Over 300,000 Axis soldiers, including Germany's Sixth Army, were trapped. It was one of the largest encirclements in military history. A new nightmare began for those inside the Kessel or cauldron. Hitler forbade retreat. He ordered Paulus to hold at all costs. Göring promised air supply, claiming the Luftwaffe would drop 500 tons daily. In reality, they averaged less than 100. Soldiers starved. Horses were eaten. Ammunition ran out. Frostbitten men froze to death nightly. Outside the pocket, German forces under Field Marshal Manstein launched Operation Winterstorm to relieve the trapped Sixth Army. They advanced but met fierce resistance. Soviet defenders dug in and counterattacked. By late December, Manstein was forced to retreat. The Sixth Army remained doomed. Inside the pocket, desperation grew. Cannibalism was whispered. Soldiers used newspaper as shoes. Wounded were abandoned. Discipline collapsed. Snow-covered trenches became mass graves. Paulus requested permission to surrender. Hitler refused, promoting him to field marshal, knowing no German of that rank had ever surrendered. By January 1943, Soviet forces closed in. Daily bombings flattened what remained of German positions. Paulus, with no food, no fuel, and tens of thousands dying, finally surrendered on February 2. Over 90,000 German troops were captured. Fewer than 6,000 ever returned to Germany. The Battle of Stalingrad killed over 2 million people. Civilians, soldiers, and prisoners perished in horrific conditions. Entire neighborhoods were wiped from maps. Families died together in cellars. Mass graves were dug through frozen soil. The city became a cemetery stretching miles wide. Soviet civilians suffered immensely. Bombs reduced homes to rubble. Food lines vanished. Thousands froze in the open. Children joined militias or scavenged corpses for clothes. Women became nurses, snipers, or engineers. The line between soldier and civilian vanished. Humanity was tested beyond imagination. German losses were catastrophic. Entire divisions ceased to exist. Some units lost 95% of their strength. Prisoners were marched east, barefoot, starving, frostbitten. Many died en route. Stalin used their fate as a message: invaders would never return home. Germany's aura of invincibility shattered. Atrocities occurred on both sides. German forces executed prisoners and civilians. Soviet partisans retaliated. Desperation made monsters. In the rubble, mercy vanished. War crimes were routine. Stalingrad was not only a military disaster, it was a humanitarian apocalypse written in blood and ash. Disease spread rapidly. Typhus, dysentery, and frostbite ravaged the weak. With hospitals destroyed, wounded soldiers screamed in agony. Limbs were amputated without anesthesia. Medicine ran out. Nurses collapsed from hunger. The Volga ran red, then black, then froze, hiding thousands beneath its icy shell. Psychological trauma was irreversible. Survivors recalled ghosts walking the streets, eyes blank. Veterans returned with nightmares. Some never spoke of it again. Stalingrad altered their souls. It wasn't just death they faced, but dehumanization. Even victory came soaked in unbearable pain. Stalingrad was more than a battle. It was a crucible of human endurance, cruelty, and defiance. In its ruins lay a million stories of bravery and horror. And it forced the world to recognize war's deepest cost, human lives ground into dust for strategic ambition. Stalingrad shattered the Nazi myth of invincibility. For the first time, Germany suffered a major, undeniable defeat. Allied morale soared. The Soviet Union shifted from defense to offense. Hitler's dreams of Eastern conquest were permanently crushed. The tide of war began to turn. Strategically, Stalingrad changed everything. Germany could no longer sustain massive offensives. Manpower and material losses were irreplaceable. Hitler became increasingly erratic. His generals lost faith. Military planning unraveled. Meanwhile, the Soviets began pushing west, liberating cities, reclaiming land, and advancing toward Berlin. International perception shifted. Allies saw the Soviet Union as a powerful force. Lend-Lease support increased. American and British leaders recognized the Eastern Front's importance. Diplomatically, Stalingrad rebalanced the global view of World War II. The USSR was no longer seen as merely surviving, it was winning. The Red Army gained confidence and experience. Veterans of Stalingrad became commanders. Tactics evolved. Future operations like Kursk and Bagration built on Stalingrad's lessons. The Soviet war machine, bloodied but wiser, became a relentless force that would eventually crush Berlin in 1945. German propaganda collapsed. Posters promising easy victory were torn down. In their place came silence and censorship. Mothers stopped receiving letters. The defeat was buried in euphemism. Heroic sacrifice became the government's narrative. But soldiers knew, they were no longer conquerors, but hunted prey. Culturally, Stalingrad became mythologized. Statues, films, and poems glorified the defense. Volgograd's skyline changed. Soviet pride soared. Every year, veterans gathered to remember. Yet beneath the flags and medals were scars. The price of victory was permanent, etched into every family who survived. The legacy of Stalingrad endures. It stands as a warning of hubris, a symbol of resilience, and a lesson in the futility of total war. No side emerged unscarred. But in that city's ruins, history shifted. The world would never be the same again. Stalingrad was where empires shattered and humanity endured its darkest trial. The city's ashes tell a story of unimaginable sacrifice and brutal resolve. If history moves you, like this video, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Let's never forget what happened when ambition met resistance at Stalingrad.